We read every day that you're everywhere, Secretary of State, having a very, very busy life, and to give time to this is really important for us, and we do appreciate the fact that you, in your busy diary, found time to be with us this morning. The whole area of skills is crucially important, and we've been considering some of that before you arrived, but we're very keen indeed to hear the government view, the department's view of the challenges we face in the agri-skills sector and the agri-food skills sector, and what you have to say to us. So welcome, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, Don. It's a pleasure to be here. Can I first of all thank you for the amazing work that you have done throughout your career, both as a pioneer in agriculture, but also as what I believe in Whitehall we call thought leaders. In other words, clever blokes who help drive the debate in the right direction. You are a great friend, not just of the department, you're also a great champion for British agriculture, and we all in this room owe you a great deal. So thank you very much. Thank you. The second thing is that I have a personal interest, obviously, in saying something about the acquisition of skills at pace in this area, because I'm only 5 months into this job, and so in that sense, I really am an apprentice when it comes to getting to know and getting to understand the issues that the agri-food sector faces. But I hope that during that 5 months that I've shown an improvement in productivity, even if there may have been some unfortunate waste that's been generated along the way. But one of the things that I've been struck by is the enthusiasm and passion which everyone who works in farming or who works in land-based education has for what they do. And you have to have that enthusiasm, because I'm very conscious of the fact that no one chooses to go into farming, and certainly no one persists in farming for the money. People work the land, people continue to work in agriculture because they have not just an affection for, but a passion for the land, the animals on it, and what it produces. So the first thing that I want to emphasize is that we can only achieve our goals in government if we recognize that we're operating in partnership with farmers, with those who help support them, and with those who work alongside them. And sometimes in the past, I know that the relationship between Defra and its predecessor departments and farmers has been, if not antagonistic, certainly sometimes unnecessarily framed in bureaucratic terms. The men and women from the ministry dictate, interfere, regulate, rather than working with, facilitating, and supporting. And I want to make sure that we do everything that we can in the weeks and months and years ahead as we face a very specific set of challenges and opportunities to work together. And one of the reasons why I want us to work together is that we all recognize that we are at a critical point in the development of policy with respect to agriculture. Critical for two reasons. One, a choice the British people made. The other, forces which are going to change the way in which policy is made across the developed world. The first, of course, is the decision to leave the European Union. And I'm well aware that there will be a range of views in this room, as there are in the country, as there are even in my family, about the benefits and challenges of that particular decision. But I would say that this is an opportunity for us to improve on what we've already been doing. We all know that there have been failures with the Common Agricultural Policy, and I won't recite and rehearse them all now. We all know that sometimes the way in which British governments have implemented European rules have added to the damage and the complexity that those European rules in themselves have inflicted on the agricultural sector. We also know, of course, though, that we are dependent as a nation on food imports, and we are dependent as an agri-food sector on food exports to ensure that we have the quality of life and the standard of living that people in this country have come to expect and enjoy. Therefore, at the same time as seeking to preserve tariff-free and frictionless access to the European market and for European producers to our own market, we also want to develop a new method of supporting those who farm our land. And that new method of supporting those who farm our land has to be built on three pillars. One is making sure that public money is there primarily for public goods, for environmental stewardship and enhancement, but also for public access, and also, and I regard this as a public good, the continuing health and vitality of rural areas and the rural economy. So when I talk of public goods, I'm not simply talking about agri-environment schemes. I'm also thinking about income support for those in less favoured areas, and I'm also thinking of support for those who play a part in making sure that individuals who don't live and work in the countryside develop a deeper understanding and sympathy for those who do. Now, the next pillar is making sure that there is support for the farming sector because you are uniquely exposed to volatility and to vicissitudes which other parts of the economy are not exposed to. Whether it's climate, whether it's a problem posed by pests and invasive species, there are factors beyond any of our control which can impact on farming, and of course world prices have their part to play in that as well. And therefore we need to, because every developed nation needs to, ensure that there are schemes and approaches, whether through tax or insurance, that help farmers to cope with the inherent volatility of the enterprise on which they're engaged. But the third area, and this is obviously the subject of today's conversation, where we want to help, is to help improve productivity above all. We're very lucky, and I've always argued Britain has the best farmers in the world, but we're also conscious of the fact that while our most productive and most innovative farmers are easily the most innovative and imaginative of any in the world, we also have some in the sector whose productivity is not what it might be. Now, some of that is a consequence of the way in which the Common Agricultural Policy and the existing system of support has operated, but there are other factors as well. We've been perhaps less good at sharing knowledge and spreading innovation and best practice across the sector than some other countries, like, for example, the Netherlands and Denmark and the Republic of Ireland. And it is also the case that while we have, I think, in Harper Adams and other higher education institutions, some absolutely first-class, world-leading higher education institutions, we haven't always been as good as we might in connecting the innovation that occurs in those institutions with the training and the ongoing development of the farming sector overall. It's been a problem which is not restricted to agriculture. It's been a problem that's held back Britain for years, that not every breakthrough in our higher education institutions has necessarily transferred into the commercial world with the speed and effectiveness that it should have done. And it is something that I absolutely believe that we need to address, and one of the things that we will be saying more about in the new year is exactly how we want to ensure that the technological and other breakthroughs which are occurring in places like Harper Adams are better disseminated and better implemented and better used across the sector. But of course, technological breakthroughs are only one part of driving productivity. Another part of it is making sure that people have the skills required in order to take advantage of new opportunities and to insulate themselves from existing and indeed new risks. And again, one of the things on which I'm very conscious is that we need to be much better at making sure that people outside the existing family of those who work in agriculture appreciate the benefits, the joys, the rewards of working in agriculture. And some have said, I don't take this view, but some have said that in agriculture there is something of an image problem, that the work is not as attractive as it should be and is not pitched in the right way to the next generation. Well, I think that is changing, because conversations about the environment, animal welfare, food, where it comes from, the quality, the provenance, the impact it has on all of us, these conversations, I know as a parent, are conversations which occur around the kitchen table with the next generation, and they have a passionate interest in the issues which are the stuff of everyday life for those in agriculture. So I believe that there is an opportunity, indeed a huge potential, for us all to make sure that those conversations, particularly involving the next generation, also lead them to consider the role that they might want to play in supporting, getting involved in, and finding a satisfying career in the agri-food sector. Now, I mentioned that in the context of leaving the European Union, this department has to rethink how it devotes its energy and its time. And as I mentioned, we're thinking particularly about supporting farming to deal with volatility, to improve productivity, and to deliver public goods. But it's also the case that even if we weren't at a point where we could reshape agriculture policy because we were leaving the European Union, we would have to think hard anyway about the future of farming, because there are global trends which are occurring, which no country can insulate itself from, and which we all have to address. The scale and scope of climate change is going to have to force us all hard to think about how heavy our footprint is upon this planet. And it is the case that farming, and this is not a criticism, it's just an observation, farming contributes to the generation of greenhouse gases, which helps accelerate climate change. And so we've got to think about, as people in this room have already been thinking about, how we can move away from a method of agriculture which in the past contributed to climate change and which now needs to actually help in the fight against climate change. Then linked to that as well is the whole question of future fertility. We all know that people have become much more aware over the last few decades of some of the damage that was done to our soils and how important it is not just to arrest that deterioration, but to improve the quality of our soils. And this poses a particular challenge in terms of science and skills as well. And one of the things that I've been very impressed by is the way in which British farmers have moved away, sometimes it's not right for everyone I know, towards no-till or min-till approaches in order to ensure that we can take an approach towards cultivation which is holistic and forward-thinking. But more will always need to be done in this area, and more needs to be done in this area, again, to disseminate best practice, and also to develop the science, and also to continue to make available those tools like glyphosate, which are vital to making sure that no-till or min-till approaches can work. But whether or not we were in or out of the European Union, we'd have to address this issue. And then we're also going to have to address the issue that as the world population grows and demand for food increases, and as the world population enriches itself and moves from the sort of diet that it's had in the past when there have been lower levels of income to the sort of diet that people adopt with higher levels of income, a demand for more protein, a demand for more variety, then agriculture across the world has to change to take account of that. And that means that we have to think about everything from the future of hydroponics to what's going to happen with the potential of gene editing, to other scientific and technological breakthroughs which will be embraced by those who want to meet that demand. And what we can't afford to do is to allow others to be shaping that debate and shaping that future. Although there are some aspects of technology which even Defra can't necessarily get right. But we need to be involved in that conversation. And if we're going to be involved in that conversation, that comes back to the skills question as well. Because farmers have always been practical scientists. Farmers have always been aware of the balance, the biological, the chemical balance of the inputs and outputs for which they're responsible. But we need to lean in overall, because science is going to play an increasing role in changing the way in which food is prepared, produced, supplied, and manufactured. And that is why I think ultimately the allure and appeal of agriculture and the agri-food sector will only grow, because you have a unique blend of things. A demand for people who can engage confidently with scientific debates. A requirement to think increasingly about the ethical and the environmental aspects of what we do. And on top of that, a chance to play a role in feeding the world, producing more for this country, and also safeguarding so much of what we consider to be valuable and beautiful about the land that we call our own. So, to my mind, when you combine those three, being at the cutting edge of science, being involved in beauty, and also playing a role in the single greatest challenge that any of us face, which is making sure that the next generation can eat healthy food and live in a healthy planet. Who wouldn't want to be involved in farming? Who wouldn't want to be at the heart of this debate? And together, I hope, we can make that pitch continue to appeal to those who care so much about our land and continue as a result to have the world's best farmers producing the world's best food. Thank you.